I'm Jack from jackstransmissions.com. We're glad to have you with us here today. We're going to talk about clutch release, forks, pivot balls, throwout bearings, and why you should shim your pivot ball, and other reasons why you really shouldn't. But what I have here is a training bell housing, throwout bearing release fork, slave cylinder, and clutch pedal assembly. Now, what we have here is, let's just imagine that this bell housing is bolted to the block. We have a new clutch in there, everything's set up right, but we're having problems where the throwout bearing release fork is sitting past its halfway point over here away from the slave cylinder. What you want to have is the throwout bearing release fork either sitting in the halfway point of this window here or closer to the slave. If it's away from the slave, that could cause some issues. What could happen is this throwout bearing fork is out this far. If you go to push the pedal in, there's not going to be enough room here anymore for the throwout bearing fork to move. What's going to happen is it's going to go over and get jammed into the side of the bell housing, and you're not going to get any more clutch pedal travel out of it. A lot of people that have this issue notice that when they adjust their pedal assembly properly, they have everything set up for the most fluid transfer to the slave possible and the most movement possible. They go to push the pedal in about 3/4 of the way down. It feels like there's something in the way. It feels like there's something stuck and won't go the rest of the way to the floor, or at least not very easily. You should have a smooth pedal travel all the way to the floor. If you feel any resistance at the bottom, what's probably happening is the throwout bearing fork is hitting the bell housing. I'll show that here, where we have this past the halfway point. It's away from the slave cylinder here on this side of the housing. I'll go to push this pedal in, and just before I get all the way to the end here, it just bottomed out against the bell housing. So what happens is I'm pushing this pedal down, and this is stopping short, and we're not getting a full travel out of the pressure plate here, or throttle. So what we're going to do, well, this can be caused by several things. It could be flywheel. Not necessarily that it's been the step height is wrong, but anytime you resurface the flywheel, you're taking material off of it. When you take material off the flywheel, the pressure plate is going to move closer and closer to the block. So the more that moves closer to the engine, the more this is going to move over to the left here, away from the slave cylinder, because it has to move to adjust itself out to have the throwout bearing up against that pressure plate. So the more the pressure plate moves out, the more the throwout bearing moves out, the more the arm has to move this way, and the more of a chance you have that it's going to hit the housing. Another thing too could be, we know so some clutch manufacturers are just, things are just not as good as it should be. It's not quite in the same spot as an OEM factory clutch would be. It's a little off. It doesn't really sit in the same position. So sometimes you can have a brand new flywheel in there, aftermarket flywheel, aftermarket pressure plate, clutch assembly. Everything is right, and it'll still be over a little bit because the manufacturer of the flywheel just had it, just a little too close to the edge. It's a little off. But we know that some flywheel manufacturers do that. It's not deliberate. It's just one of the deals we do on aftermarket products. So it could be that. It could also be the throwout bearing release fork could be worn. I'm not sure if they really bend. They tend to snap before they'll bend, but a throwout bearing fork, the way those wear out is the pivot ball and its pivot point of the fork will dig into the fork, and it'll wear that pivot area on the fork in, and it wears it so nicely you can't tell that it's worn down. So a good practice, anytime you change out your clutch assemblies or change out the throwout bearing fork, that way the surface is new, you have all the material in there, you have no wear, and the throwout bearing fork is going to be straight. Another thing too is the throwout bearing pivot ball, or the fork pivot ball could be a little worn out too, but that's very unlikely. We do see some that are worn out every once in a while, but not really enough to really hurt anything. So, but anyways, if you have all this stuff correct, and you have an aftermarket clutch in there, and it's still out this far like this, what you're going to have to do is pull the tranny off the engine again, and you're going to have to shim the pivot ball. And what shimming the pivot ball does is it moves the pivot ball out and moves the fork out a little bit. So basically, since the assembly has to go out farther with the aftermarket system, you're going to have to shim it out. And every time, depending on the thickness of the shim that you use, like if it's sticking out this much, if you put let's say you put a washer in there from first generation head bolt stud, or head bolt. Those are fairly thick. What happens is if you see it sticking out this far and you put a washer that thick in there, you're probably going to have it come in about this far, which is that's just about right. You know, you want it basically in the center line of this hole right here, or just a little closer to the slave, that you're right on the money. So, you know, the way you shim the pivot ball is actually very simple. Move our bell housing around here. You want to remove the throw-out bearing and fork assembly here. Get this off. I'm just trying to do this quickly here. There we go. Alright, now we have that out of the way. Here's our pivot ball. We'll just take a 14 millimeter socket, zip it off there, pull this off. Put whatever washer you'd like on it. You put a lock washer in there. You know, like I said, you know, put anything you want. You may not want to put something in there too thick if you're just if you're trying to get everything centered here. This is the first time you're doing it, so just stick it, you know, any size washer in there for now. You know, put it back on. Put the throw-out bearing, you know, fork, the throw-out bearing, everything back on there. Hold the tranny back onto the car and see where the throw-out bearing fork is sitting. If it's sitting in the middle or slightly towards the slave cylinder, you're good to go. If it's not, if it's still away from the slave cylinder, you may have to put a thicker shim in there. Now this seems to work on just about any Mitsubishi that we've run into. 3000 GTs, front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, turbo DSMs. You know, basically anything with a hydraulic system like this Mitsubishi has, if it has an issue where the piece is hitting the bell housing, shimming the pivot ball will normally cure the problem if everything else is done correctly.